Member Chapelier,
Present.
David, can you mute, excuse me, David, can you mute? Member Verdelli, Member Cornfeld.
Here.
Member Zarelli isn't present and Member Siegel isn't present. Vice Chairperson Greenwald,
Present.
Chairperson Riami,
Present.
and Finance Director Delina. And the Assistant Finance Director Matthews is present. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions?
Move we approve the agenda.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Agenda is approved. Any public comments? Anybody on? No public comments. Approval or discussion first of the minutes of February 24th. Are there any additions or deletions? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any unfinished business? None. New business. The preliminary fiscal year 2026 operating budget presentation.
Thank you. We talked about this with the board on June 17th. And so many of you have told me that you watched it. And so again, we'll rehash it. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. This year's theme, if there was to be one, is capital focused. And as you can see, every fund is going to participate in that. You can see that, well, first of all, let's talk about what our goals are. Our goal is to maintain the millage rate at 3.5875. We recognized about a 6.7% increase in taxable values, and that comes from the property appraiser. As you can see there, our focus is going to be capital. It's going to be, the general fund with the old fire station and the police dock in the back. We're focusing on that. Discretionary, keep in mind, discretionary that ends December 31st, 2025 of this year. Building fund and then water, and then sewer is really the other big capital focused program, and that's really going to be the sewer lining. This is a preliminary budget, so we're going to have probably 3 more renditions of this as we get a little bit more clarity. Some of those clarification items are healthcare and general insurance. We've assumed that staff compensation is estimated at about 5%. Most of our bigger costs on the staff side, we have collective bargaining agreements with the police. Fire, we've learned that in 2026, they're going to be going forward with their request to be part of a bargaining collective unit as well. So these right here are just kind of the baseline assumptions. We also had anticipated that water and sewer rates were going to increase by 5%. And that was down from our initial estimate of about 8%. So that's good. As you can see here, and as you've read in the packets, these right here are our accomplishments for 2024 and going into 2025. These are the things that we've either taken steps to start the process down or we've successfully completed it. This 2025, 2026, this is what the board had set as their strategic projects and initiatives. You know, you can see there that the marine docking facility, you can see that embedded crosswalk lighting. You can see the next one down is the sanitary sewer lining project. And so after we were successful with building the beautiful fire station behind us and setting that up, carrying dual fire departments while going through that entire process, and we were on time and under budget, and we hit the mark where we needed to. This year, we're taking a focus on other capital projects. But just to reiterate, what's made up of our millage, the operating side there at 3.4159 mils, and as well as the debt service on the fire department there. That combines our rate to set at 3.5875 mils. Keep in mind that, you know, we've maintained that same millage rate since October 1st, 2022, or FY, excuse me, 2023. And this is for the 2026 budget, so we're going into our third year. But this right here is kind of our history of what has made up our millage rate. You can see that that during 2022, 2023, you know, we also sent money from the general fund over to the water department because the rates weren't where they needed to be. And so the general fund kind of subsidized it somewhat. But as we raised rates where they needed to be, and as we move forward, we were able to then focus on the fire department. And now you can see that what our millage rate for the town is made up of is operating the general fund as well as the debt on the financing portion of that cost. But in reality, here's kind of the bigger story. As I said before, you know, we had a steep increase, you know, during these years here, during the years of 2022, 23, 24, you know, you had double-digit increases in taxable assessed value. But now we start to see that come down a little bit, right? We started to see that in this current fiscal year. You know, property values only grew by 9%, and now it went back down to 6.7%. And so the nice thing about this curve is that it appears that the steep incline is starting to transition to a gradual decrease, which is nice because you don't want any sudden movements in your assessed value. Now, why is that important? That's important because between 73 and 75% of our revenue, right, comes from property taxes. And so that's an important measure, really. And the town is unique. Some towns you'll see where 25% of their revenue is property taxes, and they have a mix of gas tax and also shopping malls and things like that, a lot of sales tax dollars. Ours is predominantly, obviously, property taxes. But the uniqueness about Highland Beaches is that this town is a concierge type of service town. We are full service, police, fire, water, sewer, library, and everything revolves around that. So all the users pay for that service. But in general, right here, you can see the general fund. Now we're going to talk about the general fund, and kind of here are some of the changes, the blue to blue, I call it. So you'll see here like the FY25, but what our budget was, and this is our proposed FY26 budget. You'll see that the one main line there is red, and what we're looking at here is we're looking at the revenue side of life. You'll see that grants really went down. Well, that's because if you recall, we used to have ARPA funds, right? So we used to have ARPA funds back in the day. We had to spend those out or lose them, and we were successful at doing that. But right now, that's really the only major decrease. But, you know, we've had, obviously, you can see our major sources of revenue there are property taxes, followed by intra-governmental. That's mainly what we get from our other departments, which we'll show you that we're going to be bumping that up probably about $200,000, predominantly from the building fund. You know, the building fund has to pay for its fair share of overall costs, and including the building that it currently sits on. So we've gradually increased that, and as you can see that there. But overall, the revenues we're anticipating are going to grow at the bottom line there. They're going to grow at about 5.6%, which is a good growth, because if inflation is at 2.5, 2.7% currently, keep in mind, we just came off of the 10% type of inflation. This is a good growth to not only carry out our capital needs, but also cover our anticipated costs that will increase. But overall, this is the revenue that we're going to use to match the expenses. And so now I'm going into the other side of that. I'm going into the expense side, general fund expenditures. And so as you can see here, personnel, we had assumed about a little bit over a 5.5% increase in personnel. Operating expenses are going to increase. Here is where you see the biggest chunk is the capital outlay. You know, we're going to add more money to capital outlay. Now, the red line there means that we're not, when you see appropriation to reserves, that's taking current year dollars and sending it to our savings account. Well, you can see in this case here, in prior years, we were able to do that because we had double-digit rates for our property values. But now we're obviously going to use those dollars that we're going to get in the current year to start investing in our capital. And so you can see that overall our 2025 budget is going to go from 18.4 million to 19.5 million. And most of that is through personnel services as well as operating and capital outlay. But you can see here on the bottom where the dollar gets stretched. We are labor and related expenses in a general fund that tends to be the most expensive aspect, right, of running an organization. Do you have a question?
Question? Is there anything either unusual or expected to be recurrent in operating expenses that would account for an 11.4% increase?
No, what we did there, when you're talking about operating versus capital, operating is mainly maintaining what you currently have. A capital outlay is that improving the structure of it. So really, again, we're just looking at, keep in mind too that we have a brand new fire station, and so we know that there's going to be additional operating expenses that we're gonna foresee there. But I see where, yep, it's an 11.4% increase from the prior budget. But overall, there's nothing really that stands out that would cause us any alarm in that. Yes, sir.
This history, but I might have forgotten, the police costs went from 3.4 million to 5.3.
What?
Police, I'm looking at the general fund expenditures.
Yep. Oh, on the department side,
Yeah.
yes.
3.4 for the police, and 2025 is going up to 5.3.
Yes. Yeah.
You might have explained it last time, but I forgot, but why isn't it this steep increase?
Well, this right here was actuals, and this is what we were budgeted. We had budgeted for FY25. We thought that we were going to do the post office behind when we got rid of the post office behind us. When that went away, we thought that in 2025 we were going to tackle that project there, as well as the marine facility unit, right? So we just didn't get around to doing that. 2024, the actual expenses, 2025, we anticipated to get to those expenditures where we're really just shifting that capital cost over to 2026 now.
Now you're
Yes.
saying 6.1 is the number?
Yes, yes.
That's very general terms. What is that exactly for?
That is exactly for the police, for the new Marine unit. So that's that, yep. As well as
The
there.
next question, is that?
Yes, yeah. So you'll see that. Those right there are kind of the biggest swings, as we said before, is the capital plan. And that's kind of what you'll see is the difference between these two budgets, right?
Thank you.
Yes. But when we look forward, we look at what our estimated fund balance is going to be. What a fund balance is that's our estimated reserves, you know? And so when we look at, hey, what does that look like? And you can see here on the chart here, our fund balance is nicely allocated between these categories, between budget stabilization, disaster recovery. We have a little bit in fire rescue. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build up that fund there for down the road when we need a new piece of fire equipment. And then you'll see there unassigned. Unassigned means that, hey, we can budget capital projects up to this amount. It's not restricted just yet. But you can see that right here, if you look in the far right-hand box, that 2025, FY 2025, we're anticipating adding more funds to our reserves. So see the plus sign there, plus $833,000 is going to drop to the bottom line. And then that balance goes right up into 2026. And you can see that this year we're going to be pulling some of those funds to cover some of the capital expenditures. But overall, we have a nice balance between budget stabilization, disaster recovery, fire rescue, and unassigned fund balance that makes up that balance. Let's talk about discretionary sales tax. Discretionary sales tax is a separate fund, and this ends on December 31st, 2025. So you can see that historically, you know, this year we have budgeted that we're going to get $415,000. You can see that the new proposed budget is only about $107,000, right? So we cut that by 75% because we knew when that's going to end. And so we have a little bit of investment earnings, as well as in prior years, when you see appropriation from reserves as a revenue, that means that's like retained earnings, right? And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling money that we haven't spent in the past in this fund, and we're going to bring it into this year. So once the money stops coming in from this fund, we're anticipating that this fund will end at the end of FY26, and no more revenues will be coming in from the state of Florida for that. But what we're planning on spending right here, you'll see our capital expenditures. You know, we plan on spending, the biggest one is we're going to use the discretionary sales tax fund, the remaining balance plus what's currently going to be put in there on that crosswalk, right? We're using it to continue to pay for the Axon body cameras for the police department. And so you can see there that these right here are the capital expenditures that we plan on using those funds for. Typically, you do not use these funds for any type of operating expenditures. They're more for capital. Yeah, right, exactly. Now, right. So now we're out, we've talked about the general fund and how the general fund's main focus is going to be capital intensive. We talked about the discretionary fund where those funds will be ending in December 31st, and that we're going to spend those money on capital improvements, predominantly the crosswalk. Now we're going into the building fund. The building fund, right, 73% of the revenue obviously comes from charges for services. You can see here on the bottom that, that historically, this fund continues to benefit from the interlocal agreement, that it has with Gulfstream. And, the interesting thing is that this fund here, this fund as well, the last bullet point there, they're going to use some of the reserves for capital improvements, and we'll get into that in the next slide. But overall, this fund continues to do great. Matter of fact, it's doing too well. We're bringing before the board to reduce rates by a little bit over 12%. The reason why is, if I go to the next slide, let me show you. Let me go to this slide. Let me go to this slide. The state of Florida frowns on the fact that you have so much money in your reserves in the building fund. They don't like that. And so staff has decided that, we are going to spend some of the money on capital improvements, including the roof that is behind us, that covers their building. They're going to work on the entrance side of their building, as well as chillers for the air conditioning, things like that in that building. But at the end of the day, you can see that the amount of money that they're bringing in versus what they're spending versus their capital, we're almost mandated that we have to begin to look at reducing rates. And so we will look at that. Our building official has given us a broad spectrum that, hey, it looks like we can still do fine with a little bit over a 12% decrease in permits and related charges. You can see right here that they've got 500 at the end of next year, they're going to have 513 days of operating cash, right? I mean, and that's pretty significant. And so that was one of the things that we looked at, and we said, okay, eventually this is growing too rapidly, and we have to control it. And so we're controlling it with two levers. We're going to be pulling more money from the building department to cover their overhead related costs to the general fund. Let me show you here. So see this transfer line item? I'm back one slide.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, the building fund, if you look at transfers, this is an expense. Historically, they've sent the general fund $500,000. Well, we're going to bump that up to $700,000. And so what we're hoping is that because the town now has its own fire department, the town, the general fund also takes part in the discussions and contract negotiations with Gulfstream, that as costs tend to increase, we have to relook at what overhead the building department should be reimbursing the general fund for. And so our preliminary numbers came back at, they need to pay a little bit more in for fairness. And so that's what we included in this budget. But all of that goes to reduce down their fund balance, their estimated reserves. And so that's what we're hoping to do in 2026 as well. So
I told that Remus guy he charges too much.
I know, but
Got to rein him in.
Right. But, but he's doing an excellent job. And, some projects extend out many, many years. But at the end of the day, we looked at it. It's been on our radar that, hey, if this thing continues to grow, but it's not growth related here in the town as much as it is refurbishing these properties, and it's a good thing, but looking long term, we're carrying too much money in the building department reserves. And so we have to take steps to reduce that.
Why is that an issue?
It's an issue because statutorily, this is a this is a fund that charges for services, right? So think about it, right? Governments have to be fair. We have to be able to show that, hey, what we're charging you is reasonable in nature. Well, that's a very good question. The only thing we can control is the rate, right? We can't. Yeah.
That's where I have a disconnect.
Yeah.
The rate's market based, it's fair. Why is there a limitation on that fund? Because they're looking at the pie in total
Yes.
versus the slices of the pie.
Yes. Yeah. So what they're looking at is they're looking at what is your operating costs versus how much you have in reserves. And so when they look at it, they sit there and they say, you can't have over 500 days of cash that you're hoarding. You're obviously, to the regulators, you're obviously charging too much for what you need to charge to carry out your task. I don't necessarily agree with it, but at the end of the day, matter of fact, that's why this is in a separate fund, right? Think about it. This isn't even in the general fund. This is separate. No, it has to be related to building related activities. Yes, yeah,
So
yes.
just one comment. I mean, obviously you mentioned that, I mean, this is obviously a good thing that the building department is doing so.
Yes.
But, you know, you mentioned they're gonna do some capital improvements that relate to, their space.
Yep.
And related space. You know, they're gonna pay a fair share of general expenses.
Yep.
They're gonna reduce their charges.
Yep.
The other thing, and I don't know enough about the building department to know that it's worthwhile, and this is not something that I typically recommend. But if they have the money, which they do, and I don't know if there's anything that they could do, but if there is anything that they could do to actually spend more money, but to improve services as seen by the residents of the community. And again, I don't know enough facts to really judge. But in terms of, you know, making the interface smoother between residents and contractors and the building department in terms of getting permits and following through on permits, anything that could be done in that regard that might increase their overhead, but would be a value-added service to the community, I think might actually be appreciated by some of the smaller contractors in the area and also some of the residents that have gone through the permitting process.
Thank you. Yeah. I know that like everything else on Highland Beach, we tend to be obviously we try to be the best at what we do. I know that permitting and turning permits around is faster. I know most things are done online, but you know, we can have that discussion with Jeff and find out, hey, is there anything else? The challenge is that, you know, when you've got an estimated, you know, $3.4 million in, you know, in your savings account, yet your operating expenses are like $2.7 million, right? That's just what the rules and the regulations are set by the state of Florida. What could happen in the future, what we're trying to stay away from is if a contractor were to file a complaint that says, hey, I'm noticing that your fees that you're charging aren't market driven. They are market driven, but they more than enough cover your operating expenses. It could be a problem. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to show good faith effort that, hey, in 2026, we're going to start by it's not a drastic, we're gonna start by lowering it by 12%, right? And we're going to see what effects that does. But investing in new, better technology, I think will also do that.
Was it a matter of first lowering rate spending? Can we lead that fund quicker on value-added projects? But where can that money go?
Well, right, obviously Jeff is the, and this is a good question that the board can ask of Jeff. Well, you're absolutely right. We can look at that. But I think right now we've tried to invest, I know in prior years and this year, we've invested in newer software. You can see that we're looking at things here that they can reasonably, right? Right. I can't have my building department buy police cars, right? That would look frowned upon, although I would love to do that, right? Or have my building department buy a new fire truck. But so I have to relate it to something that reasonably is attached and associated with them. But we'll look at that. But you can see that if I go back, right? What are they at? Their 2025 budget, they were at $2.38 million, right? And now 2026, we're anticipating them to be at $3.13 million. So we're trying to spend it on building related activities. But for now, we're going to approach it maybe on both sides, right? So we're saying, okay, if we can spend a little bit more, if we can increase that spending, which we're doing on building related activities, and lower rates, at least show regulators that we are aware of it and this is the actions that we're taking, I think that'll pass muster. So,
David, on Gulfstream,
yes.
the numbers becoming dramatically in our favor. If I went to the
Yeah.
detail,
Yeah.
just curious, this year we'll end up with revenue from them about $750,000.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at it right, it only costs us an additional, there's one line item, I'm sure there's other things, of about 120,000. So netting about $500,000.
Yeah.
The same is going to happen next year. In the first year, we did 400,000. So we're netting out $500,000 of real cash. Very
That's
nice.
one of the challenges, right?
Very nice. So there's where this increases. That's a very big
Yes.
percentage of the quote problem, which it's not a problem that we have.
Right. In most communities, the building kind of fluctuates, right? You know what I mean? You'll have high building, high improvements, and then nothing, right? And building departments sometimes suffer because they're like, hey, we just ramped up expenditures and now the building stopped. Now we don't have enough. Now I got to start laying off people. And so we're trying to do this in a phased approach. To kind of ease into, hey, what can we show a reasonable regulator that, you know what, we're taking steps to do what is the right thing to do. And so, but you're right, Gulfstream.
That's when we started this, we were hopefully it would break even.
Right.
And I think it was 21, 22 we started.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation are we sure we're getting into something that's not going to bite us in the, where? But
Right.
I'm just looking at your
Yep.
detail and I read it 5 times and I said, this is a nice little business.
Oh, no. And again, our former mayor, he saw this. He saw this, that this is going to be a good thing. And it's a perfect scenario, actually. It's one local government helping out another local government that couldn't do what they needed to do, but we could absorb the additional work. So we have this model in the building department where we have a certain level of town staff, and then we outsource to CapGov any of the overflow, any of the inspections. But I'll tell you that Jeff is a unique person in that
Yes, he is.
he's excellent at what he does, and he manages it extremely well.
Something like this could fall off at some point,
Yes.
as the whole building department can.
Yes.
So we are very aware of that. So
Yes.
let's go out and hire 10 people and.
Right, yeah, so we're not, right, so we're not trying to increase expenditures with increasing personnel, right? We're at a good level where we can maintain both. So we're trying to look at it in different ways.
Well, like Richard said, though, gives an opportunity to improve the
Yeah.
turnaround
Yes.
on what the department does. That's
Yeah.
very important.
And Jeff will have that data. He'll be able to share with the committee, how, like, what is our average turnaround of our permit time? Where does that fall in line with others? So, yes, there are those
Mhm.
outlying cases where, maybe some contractor, problem with both, but,
And just point of clarity, we always thought it was gonna make money. There were people who didn't think it was gonna make money, but Jeff et al. Said, this is gonna make money.
Yeah.
And there were people actually who didn't want to do this.
I recall.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, when that topic came to this group back then, this group was in favor
Yes,
of going
we-
ahead with it.
Ooh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, when you can cover your overhead, right, with your existing stuff and then bring on additional work. This is, oh, and by the way, the reduction in, the anticipated reduction in, those rates will also apply to Gulfstream as well. So we'll see. We're monitoring it. We have enough cushion in this department to monitor it to see where it goes. And if it gets too skinny, we'll have to readjust. But this is one of those funds that is particular about how much you can keep in your reserves. So,
That's interesting. You're limited to the amount of money you can put into reserve. That's what
In
you're
the
saying.
building.
You just can't write a check of this. We don't need this cash in the building. Let's put it into the general reserve.
no,
Can't happen.
can't happen. I've got to be able to show our auditors that, hey, for example, every year, I've got to substantiate why the building fund sends money over to the general fund. And so
Mhm.
what I do is it's just a simple allocation, right? I look at the general fund expenditures. I look at a reasonable, I think it was maybe 10 to 15%. I said, okay, here is the overhead for the general fund. Let's assume that the building department ranges from 10 to 15%. They need a 10 to 15%. They got to carry some of that cost. And so I've got to show that every year.
Who blesses it outside these walls? That's the question. Why can't we do it unless there's a big brother out there saying you cannot do it?
Yeah, well, and the other hurdle that staff have to overcome is we have to justify expenditures that come out of this fund that are building related. So that's why I said before, I would love to be buying police cars. I would love for the building fund to do all the sewer relining, right? But I can't use charges for service dollars that were geared to building fund for water and sewer or for police. I can charge them an overhead rate.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. There's something you could put in and say, they are getting a benefit.
Yeah,
And
yes.
this is how we come up with it.
Yes, and that's what we do. And that's why we looked at it this year and we said, all right, 500,000, let's look at 700. And that's why you can see there that, hey, the building fund is going to send over, starting in 2026, $200,000 additional. So that was one of our attempts to do that. And we can justify that, right? We can justify that with the general fund's involvement in Gulfstream. We can justify that with the general fund's overall price increases and how alls we're doing is we're adjusting that for inflation and whatnot.
You document that. What you're saying is documented.
Yep.
So 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of the audit requirements that when our auditors come through and they see this, they send me, they say, okay, we need you to justify your reasonableness for this overhead allocation. And I put together the same schedule, increase of staff or just increase in costs in general.
Mhm.
Now you'll notice that we haven't touched this. Well, look at 24, 25, 26, it'll go up, but it's been 500,000, I think, since 2023 or 2022, so it's stayed that same amount. We don't look at it every year, and we're trying not to nickel and dime it. We're just trying to be reasonable and conservative.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So that's going to be a challenge, but that's a good question that the board can ask. Hey, is there anything else that we can enhance, that we can spend money on, enhance going forward, the building fund expenditures on technology that would allow our residents as well as Gulfstream to have a easier use of that platform?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
That occurred before I joined this board. In a nutshell, in a summary, what is that model that you do with Gulfstream in case someone out there doesn't understand why we're making money on this deal? As
Yeah. So Gulfstream came to the town, and please correct me if I have this wrong, any of the board members. Gulfstream came to us, came to our town and said, listen, you seem to be able to operate a governmental building department flawlessly. We don't have that expertise. And so what we would like to do, and by the way, most governments do this. Let me give you an example. The Highland Beach has an interlocal agreement with Delray Beach for our sewer.
That's
Right? We don't process our own sewer, right? But we go into an interlocal agreement. They have that technology or that ability. And so when we looked at it, they came to us. We're not trying to go out and solicit businesses, but they came to us and they said, hey, what do you think about this model? And so we looked at it logistically. We said, you're just right down the road. Not too bad. When we can send people down there, we'll do that. We also have this unique model where for busy times and slow times, we can expand and contract our operations through a third-party inspection service contractor. We do so much volume here that we are in a superior position to where we get to say, no, we want that employee to be our inspector all the time. We don't want you bringing in any Joe Schmo type of inspector that doesn't do a good job. And so CapGov said, you got it. You'll always have this person here is on you and it runs this route all the time. So, but anyway, so to make a long story short, they came to us, we looked at it, they said, what we can do is since the general fund since the building fund, the funds have to stay in the building fund, Gulfstream said, and whatever you charge, you keep because it's your building department to cover the costs of doing that. Now, we try to match revenues and expenditures, but at the end of the day, we run very efficiently. We always knew that there was going to be a surplus. We always thought that building activity along this beautiful stretch of land would slow down. It just hasn't done those two things. And so we entered into agreement. It seems like the agreement is going great. Both sides are happy. Both sets of customers are getting their needs met. And we're just at a unique situation where we're sitting there saying, hey, we're growing reserve dollars too fast. And before this gets to be a problem, let's go ahead and take those steps needed to show good faith that we're doing our part and we're looking at how to slow that growth rate down.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, Doctor.
No, I was just gonna add, as you said, I think this can be a separate forum for these discussions, but you keep talking about possible technological improvements, and it can be through, the goal would be to have value-added services where this makes this town particularly special in terms of, interfaces with the building department, just like it's special in terms of interfacing with the fire department or the police department and so on and so forth. And that can be through technology, obviously, or it also can be through people, you know, and I know at the hospital years ago, and when I was there, I was opposed to it when I first heard it because I thought it was sort of like insulting, but you know, we developed a system of having, whatever you want to call them, but like patient advocates. Because while many people can make it through the complicated system of the building department or a hospital or any big entity just fine, some people can use a little bit of extra help, whether it's an individual resident who may not have the person at the condo kind of doing it for them, or some of the smaller contractors, which I haven't been personally involved with this in a number of years, but I know in years past before Jeff came, there'd be certain like air conditioner guys or plumbers, small business, you know, family business type people who just say, I'm not pulling permits in Island Beach. It's like too big a problem to get through. It's not worth my effort. And then you'd end up going with some big company, which could afford to have 3 people or whatever in the office, just filling out, you know, doing the documentation for things.
Yeah.
So, you know, my thought would be, and again, I don't know that there's anything to be done. We may already be the best department in the world kind of thing. But if there is, it would be something that we could look at. And again, I don't normally recommend looking at spending more money. But in this instance, fortunately, they've been hugely successful and they might be able on a pilot project to, if there's any opportunity to try it in order to make Highland Beach even more special than we already regard it as being, that's all. And it can be through technology, it can be through something else. And I agree, this isn't the forum for it. It should be a separate place.
Thank you.
But in that same line of thought is what the 513 days is driven by our cost divided by revenue, right?
Yep. Oh, our
Revenue divided by cost.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, is there a way to put in line with the additional services? Can we add people to the process to knock down to 513 days? Because I'm the kind of guy that if we have a revenue stream, I hate to give up a revenue stream. You know, revenue is revenue, and what's fair is fair. And if the ratio is the days of cash against what we're spending, I think we spend more money and add services versus cut our fees and make services the same. I think we have an opportunity here to think outside the box. And for the building department, what are the boundaries of what a building department can do?
Sure.
What are those boundaries? And what are the services that could fit within the confines of a building department? And we've got this ability here with this money, and we have an aging population. Now my mind's going to like the town I grew up in. Our folks never had to take their trash out. They had the trash department went into the yard, into the facility, took them out, dumped them in the trucks and put them back.
All right.
They shoveled the sidewalks. We had excess funds in our town. We bought equipment to clean sidewalks. So do we get a piece of equipment through the building department that could sweep the bike path, that could sweep the walking path, things like this.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yep. No, yeah, no, we'll obviously, we'll have Jeff come and talk not only to us, but also to the board, because these comments obviously will be brought to our board to look at that. You're right. There are fine lines, right? And so when you talk about sidewalks, let's just say, automatically my head goes to, well, that's general fund public works, right? You know what I mean? And so, no, I get it. Right. And so those are kind of the challenges, is how can I attach that nexus to how is this a building fund? Maybe it's, I know, for example, let me give you an example. I know, for example, Jeff wanted his own boat because he's like, well, wait a second. If some of the single family homes are along the canal and I want to see and so again, the bottom line is 3 years ago, we knew this was going to be successful, right? We just didn't realize that it was going to be this successful. And so at the end of the day, I think all we have to show is, we just have to show that Are we monitoring it? And what steps are we taking to address our reserve balances in this fund? As I said before, you know, maybe the answer is, hey, David, look at the reallocation. Maybe $700,000 isn't enough. Maybe we can go to 8 or 850, you know, or whatever, just to be reasonable. But we'll look at all those things.
So Harold had a question. So our relationship with Delray in terms of them supplying us fire services, does that fall under the same category as, you know, like the building department to us, you know, us with?
That's a general fund. Yeah, so the general fund is the fire and the police and,
Yeah,
and
but I
all.
mean, so when Delray was providing services to us, were they supposed to not make a you know, is it a similar thing?
Yeah, well, see, anytime a local government, it's not a fast rule, right? And anytime a local government provides a cost of service, right? They should provide you with a cost of service study, water and sewer. Why do you need to charge this much for what you're providing, right?
So
And-
it is the same thing, sort of.
Yeah, well, now with the fire department, that was an agreed upon amount. Yes, you assume that the other party has done that calculation. And typically when it comes to fire, you know, you're talking about trucks, you're talking about FTEs, you're talking about training, pension costs and things like that. And so it's a lot more invasive. But at the end of the day, yes, when a town provides a service to its residents, it should be matched by some type of reasonable cost of service. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate or anything like that. You just want to be able to show, hey, this is what it costs us to provide a permit. This is what it costs us to run the building department. And this is kind of what our fees are based on. And so the unique thing about this is, think about this. Building departments can turn relatively quickly, right? And next thing you know, you have all this costs that you're still supporting. A lot of times, it's the other way. The general fund is supporting the building fund through transfers out to the building fund. This is one of those situations where this would be a totally different story if we didn't have Gulfstream. We wouldn't be in this position this quickly, right? But at the end of the day, this is where we're at. And I think we just have to show, we've got to come up with, hey, what else can we do? Can we maximize our level of service to justify our costs? Or is it an effort of doing three things? Increasing our direct cost, right, through enhanced services, increasing the allocation that the building fund sends to the general fund, and maybe not lowering rates by 12%, but maybe lowering rates by 7 or 8% or what have you. So we'll have to look at that balance just to show that we're doing our part. So
What?
What we are saying, it seems that the Gulfstream has become a major player in the operation of this building department.
Yeah.
If you take them out of the equation, I'll stop there.
yeah, I mean, it's now think about it. If we take them out of the equation, well, we structured it so that just changes our variable costs, right? And so if I lower my revenue, right, then my variable costs of outsourced inspection services will lower as well. So, but we'll monitor that. It's a good problem to have, and we'll look at every aspect of it. But this is, yeah, I mean, you look at it and you go, wow, you know what? That's more than enough money to cover our sewer lining project. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't touch that.
As, I was just thinking about has anything happened with the reconciliation with Delray?
No,
Nothing.
no, that's still in
Somewhere.
litigation, yeah. So, but anyway, so this is a good problem to have. But we're working on it. We're aware of it. We haven't yet settled on a a concrete plan. We're floating around ideas, right? But we're trying to do everything we can. And again, this is a preliminary budget. We'll take another look at, and we'll have Jeff more involved with, hey, long term, what does the next 5 years look like? And we'll also have him bring to us what the Florida statute that limits that amount of money that you can carry forward year after year. So we only got 2 more funds to go. So this is your water fund, your water revenues, right? So we're anticipating that our rates will go up 5%. Again, as anything else, charges for services dictate how much revenue this fund gets. We are, the next slide here, this is gallons. This is usage data. You can see that we have 2 types. We've got water and we've got irrigation. And you can see that historically, right now we're up about almost 3% versus this time last year. We're up 3% in consumable water, potable water. On the irrigation side, we're up about almost 7.5% comparing this year to this time last year. And so those are good things. How is that driven? Well, we're investing in more accurate meters, which always help. But at the end of the day, here's the dollars. Now, all I'm doing is I'm converting my gallons. And by the way, these are in thousands of gallons. So when you see 40,000, that's 40 million. So there's a lot of water that goes through this town, as well as also on the irrigation side. But you can see that on a revenue side of life, revenue is up by 11.5% on the water side, and on the irrigation side, it's almost up over 16%. Now, that's a combination of an increase in rates and an increase in consumption. Okay. Highland Beach is very seasonal, and you can see the seasons there. And as well as it's very much affected to the fact of rain, right? Right now, it's been kind of a dry season. All right. And so the less rain a community has, the more people have to irrigate, the more expensive it gets. But overall, you can see that that our expenditures, right? Our expenditures, personnel services, operating expenditures, capital outlay, and we increased a little bit there for our contingency. But overall, we're anticipating that our expenditures will increase about 6.2%. You can see the dollar bill down here, the stretch of it, that it does seem to be nicely allocated to where, you know, a third of your expenses are labor and related, another third of your expenses are operating, and then another third is capital, debt service, and transfers. Now, this fund here, when you see those transfers there of 500,000, right? Those transfers there, that's going to the sewer fund. And so because there is this correlation between water and sewer, sewer doesn't have any employees. The only thing the sewer has is an interlocal agreement with the town of Delray Beach to treat our sewer. Let's look at what the debt is on the water side. You can see here.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
From a accounting standpoint,
Yes, sir.
why does sewer have no employees? I mean, I know they don't directly hire anyone, but I mean, they have people who work for the water department or public works or some combination, general fund people and
Right.
everybody else that
Right.
are involved, presumably.
Yeah.
So
right.
why isn't that a thing from an accounting standpoint?
I don't think it's much more, I don't think it's an accounting standpoint as it is operational. I think we have 6 lift stations, right, in the town. And so our water people will go out and inspect those 6 lift stations, okay? Allocating staff to the sewer fund, because we don't have any treatment. The only thing we have is we have a collection system. So in sewer, there's treatment and collection. And so we only have half of that. And we do that through the lift stations. They check the lift stations, but it's very minor as far as day-to-day stuff. If a lift station were to go down or need work, we would call a third-party contractor to do that. Predominantly because although our operators are typically dual certified, both in water and in sewer, the predominant cost that the town has is making of the water and storing of the water and distributing the water. The collection side is, that's done obviously by gravity, and that's also done by the lift stations to get it done there. So, yeah. But overall, you can see that our debt in 2022 and 2023 went down in 2024, and then it went down in 2025. Now, it's going to stay that way until 2029, when the Bank of America debt falls off. But look at these interest rates, right? I mean, this one here is at 1.18, 2.64, 2.82, 3.41. So the interest rates are still good and attractive, but the next time that we have a reduction in our so-called mortgage payment is in 2029. Yeah. And so now let's look at this fund. Let's look at what capital projects they're going to be doing this year. They're going to be doing the mezzanine walkway. They're going to be doing their steel beam reinforcements. We're going to be doing well number 8 improvements, as well as the acid tank replacement. I always tell people the only thing that beats the cost of owning a boat is running a water or sewer enterprise fund. It's very maintenance and capital intensive, and especially the fact that we live so close to the salt water. Okay, and so things need to be maintained. But what we're doing this year is we had 144 days of operating cash. We're going to spend out some of that cash in this year, because what we've realized is, like you have, things just tend to get more expensive, right? And so at the end of the day, we're fine with dropping our estimated cash reserves down to about 60 days of cash. Because number one, we always have the general fund, right? That is a backstop. But number two, we have to get to these capital programs. Number three, we have to balance everything with rate increases, right? I don't want to increase rates just to have a little bit more cash reserves when I don't have to. And so that's kind of what we looked at as far as balancing. We know that we've hit the residents high with water and sewer charges. We're aware of that. But we have to balance things out. And so we're going to try to get to all of these capital projects, and it's going to drop down our estimated unrestricted number of days of cash. But the good news is that people can only live 7 days without water. So we feel like we're pretty comfortable with dropping that down right now, because the general fund has enough girth that if the water fund ever needs anything, the general fund can step in its place and act like a big brother.
I mean, it doesn't look like, looking at the graphs, it doesn't look like any conservation program didn't seem to work. And, we're charging a lot more. Obviously, we're going to be doing some things with the money, which is nice.
Yep. And I got to balance that, right? I got to balance that with the fact that, the last 3 years, you've come off double-digit increases, right? And we've also got helped we also helped when our debt service got dropped too, right? So all those things. So you can see here, our debt service dropped off. We raised rates. We're getting a little bit more comfortable. We just got to go ahead and handle these major capital items in that fund. And eventually we're predicting that 54 days is the lowest point. From this point on, we will just continue to grow the days cash in this fund.
Do we, excuse me, do we know what the sewer lining project is going to cost yet?
Yes. We'll go into that next.
Okay.
So here's the sewer fund, right? Separate fund, right? The sewer fund, we're going to be pulling money from, instead of doing a bank loan, right? Instead of doing a bank loan, we're going to pull money from the sewer fund's excess reserves. That's why we're pulling money. We're doing appropriation from reserves, and we're going to bring that into revenue to pay for the major sewer line. And let me get to that right there. Let me get to answer your question. Right here, it looks like it's right now, it's about 1.750 million to do that. We've had some challenges, obviously, with the road work that's going ahead. I know that we were throwing around numbers between $2 and $3 million. I know that we were looking at state revolving grant funds that were at a very low interest rate. But a lot of times in doing those, it delays the process, right? If we have the cash now and we have the contract and we have the contractor, let's go ahead and let's start executing this on the smaller streets while they're getting done with that road work. But that's to answer your question.
No, I mean, that's a big, in other words, I lose track already, but I mean,
Yeah.
when we went to the residents to get approval for a sewer project, we were talking about $3 million. This
Yeah.
is coming in at 1.75. That's a significant, all good news, obviously.
Yes,
but
obvious. Yeah.
It's a significant difference.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, I think that's happening because I think inflation is settling down, right? I mean, we had double-digit inflation many, many years ago. I also think that contractors were privy to the fact of how much every town got in ARPA dollars. And so when a contractor sees smartly that, oh, you got, with $2 million of ARPA funds, how much is this project going to be? Well, it's going to be $2 million, right? Because we want to grab all those ARPA funds. And so I think that because we already have the engineering side of this project done and it's ready. It's what we would call shovel ready, right? We know that contractors are starting to be a little bit more competitive, right? The days of just set your price and forget it are gone. I think people are being a little bit more competitive. And but right now we're pretty solid on that number. And we don't have to wait necessarily with the main road A1A that we're going to be interfering with. We can start on the side roads.
Are you going to be tearing up the roads again?
I don't know the answer to that, but typically it goes between manhole and manhole. And so what I want you to think is they go in one manhole and they go to another manhole and they put this liquid down the pipe. And then what they do is they inflate it. It's like a balloon. And then that composite material adheres to the sewer, right? And makes that new pipe from inside out like brand new. And so that's the technology that's there. Now, here's the good news when you do a sewer lining project. Your treated sewer costs typically go down. Because if you think about it, right now, as tides start to come in, the cracks in our pipe, we're treating salt water, right? And so what we're sending to Delray Beach is a combination of sewer as well as salt water. So when you line your sewer pipes, Now you're just getting pure sewer. And so typically your cost per 1,000 gallons your overall cost drops down because you're not sending as much volume. And so that's a good news.
What is the useful life once they finish the project? Is it-
Oh.
What are they warranting, what are they guaranteeing, or?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, but it's like a fiberglass. It's been around. I will have to get back to you. I don't
That's
know
a-
the answer to it, but it's way better than digging everything up and putting new.
Agreed.
I mean, it's night and day. And so, yeah. And so, the idea is, it used to be, $1 million a mile. It's probably a little bit more money than that, to lay sewer lines. That was the rule of thumb, but I think with this right here, I think you can get crews in there between the manholes. They can knock out a section, wait till it dries, harden, and we move on. A lot of times what you have to do is you got to the main problem is you have to reflow the sewer that's coming in, right? Because I can't be lining these 2 points with sewer coming in, right? And so I've got to, so that's some of the challenges that they'll do. But the technology has been around for a very long time. I would say probably 20 plus years. So it's been tested, it's been trued. It's become one of those, when are you going to get around to it? Sewer lining projects. So it's very effective.
We'll be long gone. before-
No,
before they're duct taping. and-
that is a possibility. But anyway, so again, this fund here, we're anticipating a 5% increase in the rates. We're going to be spending money on the sewer lining, lift station number 2. We got grant funds
We did.
from Peggy for some of our lift station work. So that's always a good news. You can see right there, grant funds, $230,000 we got. And so that's always welcome. As with water, you can see sewer tends to mirror water. And so you can see obviously the increases in both. That's normal. And the main thrust of this year is going to be capital outlay, right? And we're going to use excess reserve funds. So we're going to drop down from 417 days of cash to about 125 days of cash. But after that, this major sewer lining project, we feel that 125 days of cash, that'll be the lowest level that we'll see, and we'll just build from there. So overall, this right here is a summary. So if you see here, this right here is the source of funds right up here. So this is the revenue side of life. So this is the source of funds. And these right here, the columns are all your different funds, right? And so you can see that, hey, line 12 is total revenue, right? Line 14 is grant funds. Line 15 is those interfunds. From the building to the general fund, from the water to the sewer, from the sewer to the water or the general fund. That's what all those represents. And then you can see here, line number 16 is from reserves. So, right, I'm pulling money in. We tend to only look at a snapshot a year in time. And so we sit there and we go, okay, how am I matching if I'm going to have, I'm on the expense side now, the use of funds. If I'm going to have a $32.5 million budget for 2026, right? If I'm going to spend $32.5 million, where am I going to get that money from? Well, you go back to the sources of funds. Here's our sources of funds. Now, sometimes we use from reserves to plug the holes, right? So we sit there and we say, what money is going to be coming in this year? And if we don't have enough, we tend to pull it from excess reserves, just like you would do with your savings account or what have you. And so that's our goal, is to use some of excess reserve funds to tackle capital projects. And that's the theme for this year. So
All reserves after all this will be $8 million, I assume?
yeah, well, you got to go by fund, right? And right, because you got to look at funds. So let me give you an example. So the sewer fund after all this will be about $685,000. The water fund after this will be about $674,000, almost identical. The building fund, remember we talked about that? That's going to be $3.4 million. The discretionary sales tax we planned that ends, as I said before, so that's going to go to zero. And then the general fund, we're looking at about $8.7 million, but only really $2.8 million of that is unassigned. So still going to be healthy, right? So very healthy. We're trying to do the prudent thing by keeping costs low, but also not push so much cost onto the ratepayers by using excess reserve dollars. And we think that 2026 for those water and sewer funds, those are going to be that's the bottom end. From then on, we just continue to grow our reserves back, just like we did with the fire station. Remember, the fire station, we were like, all right, we're going to build this. It's going to be $8 to $10 million or whatever. We're going to pull $4 million from our excess reserves and we're going to borrow $5 million. And so that's always been the goal with our budgeting is in good years, let's store the money. Let's not lower the millage. Let's store the money for capital improvements as well as a hedge in thinner years. And this is the year where we say, you know what, we're going to start using some of that excess reserves and we're going to reinvest in the town's assets.
I have a question.
Yes.
What monies or grants has Peggy Gossett Seidman provided for this town? Just so we go on the record and acknowledge the way she's been working for us in Highland Beach.
Yeah, she's done a great job. You have to understand that to Tallahassee for the zip code that you're in to get any type of appropriations is incredible, right? Because believe it or not, there are other towns out there in much more need. But yeah, she was able to get us, I think this is the second or third year that she was able to get us, the $200,000+ of funding that we needed for work on some of our lift stations. Now, the town is blessed with great residents that we would never let anything get in disrepair shape. This year, we're focusing on, obviously, the old fire department building, what we're going to do with that. We're focusing on the police marine facility unit behind us here. The one challenge that we
Did
have
Peggy have anything to contribute to that?
to the,
The marine, the dock?
not to my knowledge.
Not to your,
Right, yeah, not to my knowledge.
I thought she did.
I don't know.
I'm not sure what made it through the budget, and then we're still not sure what the governor's going to let through with his line item veto. I know we lost something last year with the line item veto. I think she got
I
something
heard
for
that
the
yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not 100% sure, so I don't, but it is possible. I know that they're looking at what they call a fine grant, FINE grant, but I'll find that out.
Anyways, I just wanted anyone out there to know she's been working so hard for us and it's appreciated.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Yep, thank you. So let's look at what this next process is, right? So we have the FAB meeting. That's where we're at today. July, what we'll do is we will do an official not to exceed maximum millage rate. August, if needed, we'll have additional budget meetings, okay? If there are any major changes. But we're all trying to hit the September, right? So September 2nd at 5:01 is when we'll have the first public hearing. And then September 18th at 5:01, we'll have the second public hearing to establish our budget becoming effective October 1, 2025 to go into September 30th, 2026. So the main thrust of this budget year is let's focus on using excess reserve funds to enhance needed capital work, as well as cover those normal operating type of expenditures. I think we have one outlier, and that's the building fund. Really, what is our long-term plan with that? And we'll get the committee back that information as to what we can and can't possibly do. Yeah.
Excellent representation of our town.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But it always wasn't like this, right? And so it's we've really yeah. And so yeah. And so again, the town continues to do 5-year budgets. We tend to look long term. We tend to set out a plan. And this town is concierge service to its residents, i.e., because the residents are paying 73% of the bill. You should get the absolute best that's out there. So
I have no problems with the budget, and I appreciate the presentation, which
Yeah.
is, as usual, was excellent and answered questions. I wonder if in the future it might be possible for you to present to us how we should be approaching, if there's a policy or anything in terms of how one deals with large capital expenses. And by that, I mean items that are over $1 million or a couple of $1 million and are expected to be the kind of capital project that's going to last for 20 years or thereabouts. In terms of when it's reasonable to seek financing, because you look at the kinds of loans that are available to us, and they're typically not the kinds of loans you can get as an individual. I mean, they're really low interest rate loans versus when it makes the most sense to, quote, as you say, take the money and just pay as you go out of capital reserves. And again, I'm not talking about buying the police a new car for 50 grand that you just put in the annual budget as a capital expense. I'm talking about the big items like the sewage project, and we may not have any on the immediate horizon, but we will in the future. And I mean, I've read a little bit about all this stuff and what other communities do and what the best practice is, but it seems to me that we don't have like a real policy as to that. I know that the commission now, I have no objection to this because I think it's fine. Commission now is really big on, hey, we got some money, let's go just pay for it and not worry about debt. There are some people that actually feel that that's not necessarily the only way to go on long-term capital projects. So I just wondered if, I don't think we have a policy now. I think it's up to what you recommend in the commission. It always will be, but I wonder if you could talk to us, maybe educate at least me. I don't know how much everybody else knows about it. As we move forward and we come across bigger capital projects, if there's a sort of a system that should be followed in terms of how we approach it, rather than, I don't know, I like to have processes for that as opposed to just,
Like compare the interest you could get on the money that we have in reserves versus the loans. We might be ahead of ourselves.
no, and the doctor is absolutely right. Theoretically, if you have a longer life asset, you probably want to match that up with a longer life loan. Okay. And especially when a community has available to them less than 1% interest on a loan. You know what I mean? I think that we decided to go this route. It was more of timing. But in the future, to answer your question, Doctor, yeah, we'll definitely bring that up to Marshall and the management and the board if they want something like that. We had just come off the fire we're now starting with the roads. We're looking logistically. The amounts that the contracts were coming in seemed to be really, really high because everyone saw that we were flush with this new ARPA funds, right? And so there were all these differentiating issues that when we sat there and we said, listen, how much can you do this for? Just pull the trigger. Let's get it done with, because it's like any other problem. It's not getting better over time. And so when we looked at that and we finally got some numbers in, we said, you know what, we can start doing that. But going forward, what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to accumulate monies to buy future fire department equipment. That's going to be ongoing. That's going to be expensive stuff. These things are, when an ambulance costs you $1 million, it's pretty tremendous. And the lead times are long. So, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to fund almost like a sinking fund where we started with $250,000 and things like that. So we want to be more prepared for that because number one, we don't know where interest rates are going to go, but long-term thinking, especially with your enterprise funds, when you have those funds that charges for services where we can set a cost based on an expenditure because we have a loan that we need to do this. As I said before, your water and sewer, you will typically not become debt-free with those because they just continue to cost a municipality a lot of money in repairs and maintenance because of the corrosive nature of things. But we will take that suggestion and we'll see what we can do.
Back to the cash on the building department. We know that FP&L is going to raise rates.
Yep.
They're going to probably settle out around 6.5% to 7%. So I saw there was a chiller project for the one building. Why don't we do an energy efficiency project across all buildings for Highland Beach and upgrade all of our HVAC equipment to energy efficient equipment, upgrade all of our water consumers to energy efficiency, do it under the auspices of energy efficiency, and take that money out of that fund versus typically those are projects that are loan based. And if we could do that, we could maybe knock down that 516 days, put everything back into our buildings proactively, higher SEER ratings on our RTUs, better water efficiency throughout the whole city. So that's a way to maybe utilize some of that cash through the building department.
And I have just one other request possibly for a future presentation, not regarding today's, is I would like to get some feel for what the Marine Patrol Division of the Police Department is actually costing us. I was a big proponent of that for safety reasons when it first started. I think they're doing a good job as best as I can tell, although again, I don't know what really don't have many benchmarks or parameters of what they're doing. But, we're now being faced with an additional fairly big capital expense for their dock. Obviously, up until now, we've been kind enough to have it docked at one of the condominiums, but I mean, they need their own dock for obvious reasons. But I'd like to know in terms of, operating, how many people are involved, the cost of maintaining the boat, all that kind of stuff, and again, my personal bias would be that whatever it is, it's very worthwhile.
Yeah.
But I'd still like to see that as a carve out because it's one of those new value added services that we've had in the last
Yes.
5 years to make us special. It would be nice to see how it's working out.
Okay. So, we had the revenue on.
Yeah. So what you're looking at here is right. This right here is through the month of May, right? So I think we're at 69% so October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So this is 8 months of the year. And again, this is kind of what you saw on the last slide. This is where we're at right now. You can see that revenues, like if I'm on page one, of this handout, top line, line number 6, right now our revenues are very strong because we do get front loaded with our property tax dollars. Line 12, miscellaneous revenues continue to exceed budget. Overall, line 34, you know what, we're about 19% over all funds. We're about the revenue side, we're about 19% greater than what we had anticipated. And then if you go down the expense side of life, when we compare that to the budget, we're about 12% under budget right now through the month of May. Now, what this just compares our actuals to where we should be at the budget based on a straight line methodology. Okay, so all it takes your budget, right? Multiply it by 7 and times 12 to get what the budget to May should look like and where we actually at. If I turn the page, this right here is actuals by fund. So lines number 1 through 18, these right here are all your sources, total sources of revenue. There's the general fund, the discretionary SACs, the building fund, the water fund. And then line 19 through 31, these are your expenditures, right? You can see that, right now, 46% of your total expenditures are public safety. You can see that we're still churning away 14%. Line 25 is capital outlay. And then you can see there, you could also see that lines 15 and lines 30, those are the transfers between all the different funds, right? So you can see that. And then lines 35 through 41, I just break down what the transfers are for. You can see that from the building fund to the general fund, from the water fund to the general fund, or from the sewer fund to the water fund, or what have you. And so you can see there, those right there are all the different transfers that we do to cover, if it's overhead, to cover the building department's portion of zoning and review activities and things like that. So we really try to be fair across all other funds and be reasonable in any type of allocation. But so far as normal, we're under budget on our expenditures and a little bit over budget on our revenues, which provide us to put more money into reserves to meet next year's capital. And so that's kind of the overall of what we're looking at through May. So,
But as you know, the straight line method for us doesn't work.
and it doesn't work, especially for ad valorem taxes, right? Because
Yeah.
what happens is December, probably in November, December, January, I get most of the 73% of our revenue coming from the citizens, we get right away. And so, but it does have to last us throughout the year.
I'm just commenting on the notes, under budget, over budget. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's more of saying it's based on the, does not work because it's based on the 12-month average.
Yeah, yes,
That's
yes,
it.
exactly. So,
Just one comment. Are we going to be able to see the conceptual design for the marine boat dock and what they're going to do in the firehouse? When we voted and they approved it, is that coming soon? Have they hired somebody or
I don't know the answer to that.
where are we on that? You
Yeah,
don't know?
Right. No, I
Okay.
do. I don't. But I know that they're working on, and even in addition, they're working on a design for the old post office, right? And what the police department is going to look like in the future, right? And so we're working on that. A lot of these things, obviously, like any project, there's a lot of initial planning up front, engineering's architecture, and then we get the dollar value and we fall out of our chairs and then we kind of regroup.
Wouldn't it be nice if the old post office could be like a place where people could pull their permits? Like a little designated easy area to go in and, for getting a permit to do something to your house, use that instead of police? And make it
I don't
easy
get to
for
make those
people?
decisions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Right. Now, the two superpowers in any town, right, are the police and the fire, right?
Yeah.
So, right. And so, we look at the fact that the building department has a nice facility. You obviously have to walk upstairs, but I'm sure that people will walk down. Maybe there's a kiosk service that they can have, but I'm not sure. But yeah, so I think the building department is good. It's in a good location, but I don't get to make those decisions. Right now, our police department is, we're looking to kind of upgrade that, and we're trying to see, okay, can that be for some type of other enhanced service to our community for police-related activity? Matter of fact, the dock is also going to be used by the fire department, right? You have injuries on the water there. We need to get stretchers out there. And that's why that dock is not just going to be your normal everyday dock. That dock is going to be built to the nines.
Yeah, plus you may have to put Jeff's boat there when he gets.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I'll be honest with you, 2 years ago, I thought he was crazy and asking for that. But I'm telling you, he made a good suggestion in that, hey, I got to get around to these properties. How about if I just go, if a place is on the thing?
There's that Jeff guy again, spending money like, now, as long as I can use the boat,
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I told him a jet ski. I
How
told him.
about a drone? Drone would be less expensive. To
Yeah,
see properties.
now you're killing the party. Come on.
Okay, okay.
You can't go out on the, in the water in a drone.
Let me ask you the question I ask you every year. Is there anything going on that concerns you?
No, again, I wish I had a better answer.
That's a good, we like.
Yeah,
that.
no, I agree. We spend, well, no, I mean, staff spend time, especially with the manager and with the commission and with you, and we thank you for your time and your input. It's invaluable, but Highland Beach is just very unique. When you come over those bridges, this is it's like the Wizard of Oz movie where it goes from black and white to color, and it just runs well. We have a great manager, we've got great commission, great subcommittees, and we're in a very great season right now. And what we tend to do is we tend to squirrel away in the good times, right? To see what's going to happen next year or the year before. And, but yeah, it's a beautiful community. And we might possibly go up in the ranks. I think we were the third lowest millage rate for the town on coastal communities. Now, we'll see what other communities are doing. We may go up to number 1 or number 2. And when you're talking about the services that the residents pay for, there's no doubt the residents pay for this, and it's because that's what they want. And so it works perfectly that way. And so it's really a concerted effort on how municipal government should run. So.
Well, if we, get up to where Del Rey is, they're running things really well over there.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, okay, so, thank you. Any board members, say? So we're gonna.
My only comment would be maybe David can pass on to the commission that no major concerns were raised at this meeting with, assuming everybody agrees, with the planned budget for this year.
Yep, and I'll get with Jeff and we'll figure out alternatives. But I know that Jeff and the town manager have looked at various scenarios. But we'll see what else is out there. But you can see that our hands are tied, right? I got to show that I'm doing something.
Yeah. Marshall likes to spend money too, so it's not a problem. Okay, so we're gonna close for July 4th. And then we're gonna have a special magistrate hearing on July 8th at 1 p.m. And then a planning board regular meeting at July 10th. 9:30, and then on July 15th at 1:30 is the next town commission meeting.
When's our next meeting?
And we don't have one scheduled.
Well, it is summertime, so.
Summer, let's, we had to do this one to get the thing pulled done. So, anything else from anybody? Da-da-da-da, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always educate